Hello, and welcome to The Prodigal Life. I'm Deacon Harold, and I'm joined, as usual, by Nick and Ellen. And we are here to help you to create a deeper experience of God's love in your life.
Today, we have a special guest with us. You know, there are some people that say they are pro-life, and there are some people who occasionally will find themselves present at a prayer vigil at an abortion clinic or something like that. And then there are those people whose very essence of life is the pro-life movement. And today we have a very special guest with us. Ellen, would you like to introduce him?
I would love to introduce from the Pro-Life Action League. We have Eric Scheidler with us. And we are very, very fortunate to have him with us because he is going to share his testimony. Tell us a whole bunch about, you know, how he got so involved in this and what his faith life has looked like. And we're really, really excited about it, having him on here. So it's going to be great.
Brilliant.
So Eric, if you want to say hi and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be with you. My name is Eric Scheidler. I'm the executive director of the Pro-Life Action League. Before I was with the league, I was with an organization called the Gift Foundation, which was focused on Catholic teaching on marriage and sexuality, and particularly the issue of contraception and the theology of the body, Humanae Vitae. And before that, I was a fallen away Catholic who was brought back to his Catholic faith largely through the experience of taking a class in natural family planning with my wife, April, when we had 3 kids and thought maybe that was just enough. I now have 8 children, and I've been a pro-life activist for over 20 years. And I'm excited to be with you here today and share some of my story.
Be honest, Eric, are you guys going to shoot for 20?
Well, I'm 56, and I'm not at liberty to disclose my wife's age, but we did meet in college. So you can do the math on that. I think 8 is what we're going to have to settle for.
I don't know, Eric. I think your God might be too small, man. I don't know if you've read this thing called the Old Testament, but anyway, just
joke
kidding.
Around a lot. You have 4. He has 4 children.
I do have 4. Yeah, we just had our 4th.
I have 3, and you have 4.
4, yeah.
So,
one in heaven. Son in heaven.
One in heaven.
8 children from you said at the time you had 3?
Yeah. Well, you know, taking a class in natural family planning had a huge effect on my life, as you can imagine. I went from being an atheist to being, well, more of an agnostic maybe, who thought natural family planning sounds like baked over rhythm method. This is nonsense. We'll be back to the vasectomy discussion in a few weeks. To being a daily mass goer at that time.
Really?
So
wow.
it was a dramatic experience. But one of the first effects of it was my wife and I really had it put on our heart that we wanted to have another child. So we went from saying, okay, 3's plenty, let's put an end to this, to maybe we should have another one and another. And it wasn't like we decided, let's have 8 kids. We just kept wanting to have another baby because we love babies. And just the other day we were chatting about that and just marveling at the courage and naivete of our 30-something selves that, I mean, at my age now, middle age, where did I have the energy for 8 children?
8 children.
I don't know how we did it. It's the most monumental thing I've ever done in my life, but I just don't know how, 32-year-old Eric really got himself into that.
Do you have any grandchildren?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry?
Do you have any grandchildren?
I do not have any grandchildren.
Okay.
And you'd think demographically I'd be pretty much set up for future grandchildren, but it's very difficult right now. It's very difficult for young people to find each other. The world seems aligned against forming marriages. So we're now in the position of praying for our children to find spouses out there in the world.
Amen. That's
Eric,
beautiful.
could you share with us in the NFP class? I resonated with so much of the story you just shared, even just that much of it, because I also was kind of dancing the line between atheism and agnosticism. And it was theology of the body that brought me back to the church, similar to what you're describing. It wasn't in an NFP class. It was at a Christopher West event that I attended begrudgingly on the campus of my university. And that night just completely changed my life. And there are specific things about what I heard Christopher say that night that completely changed the game for me. And I'm curious what the things were in the NFP class that you and your wife were exposed to that allowed the Holy Spirit to do that work on your hearts.
Well, I think first of all, from the very first class, I had to acknowledge, as a person who tries to be objective and fair, that the science that they were offering to us made sense. And it was new to me. This whole amazing symphony of hormones that unfolds over the course of a woman's monthly fertility cycle, the estrogen, the progesterone, the HCG, the luteal body, all these amazing things that are happening that I never knew about before. Simply seeing that the science worked, it should work, it made sense, was really impressive to me. I thought, wow, the reason we were interested in natural family planning wasn't because of any religious impulse. Obviously, we were both agnostics at the time. It was because we were into natural stuff. We had two of our three children at that time had been born at home. So we had home birth. Natural birth was important to us. We were into natural foods, organics whenever we could afford them. As the family grew, it was harder to afford organic food. We had to make some compromises. We were interested in natural health. My wife was always more likely to go to a naturopath than a physician, especially early in our marriage. So we were kind of granola types, and trying to cooperate with nature was somewhat attractive, even though I thought there was nothing to it. But as soon as I saw there was some serious scientific foundation for this, I was impressed. But then it was really nothing more than the practice of it. Simply having to abstain, especially when you're learning, right? You really have to practice the natural family planning pretty strictly in the early months of it, just to make sure that you understand what's going on, and are not going to be, whether you're taking the class because you're having trouble conceiving or because you want to postpone pregnancy, you need time to learn it. So that practice of abstinence for many days at a time, made for the sake of my wife, for her good, as I began to appreciate more and more the beauty of her femininity, what she was participating in as a woman, my role as the protector, as the husband, as the person who's supposed to understand this and collaborate with her to understand that fertility system and deploy it in a way that made sense to us. That it affected me personally, this practice of self-sacrifice. Then I read Humanae Vitae. It was in the Couple League book. It's for some reason. So I read the thing, and it was a puzzler to me. I thought, now, how can the Catholic Church be right about contraception when they're wrong about everything else, including the existence of God? I read Humanae Vitae, and I read that passage where Pope Paul VI lays out what the consequences would be for a couple who indulges in this disruption of the procreative meaning of sexual intimacy. And I thought about my own marriage and the struggles my wife and I had early in our marriage. And I thought, this is all true. We've been arguing about sex in this way. We've been distrusting each other. I've been thinking of her. I've been objectivizing her in this way. And it all just made sense to me. And I thought, how is this possible? So, I thought maybe I need to consider going to church. So I started reading the Gospel of Matthew. I started listening to an old Scott Hahn tape series that my dad had given me years before, and I'd lugged it around from place to place. He even asked for it back at one point. And for some reason, I kind of was reluctant to give it back to him, even though I knew I was never listening to it. But I finally did. I finally listened to the Four Marks of the Church series, one Holy, Catholic, and Apostolic, one tape for each of those. And I was angry because somebody forgot to tell me about how awesome the Catholic Church was when I was in Catholic school for 12 years. The vision that Scott Hahn laid out for what the church was in the world, it started to click with why the church would get something like contraception so right against all the forces of the culture and forces within the church, forces within academia and the scientific community, and amongst lay people just pushing back against that. And it just forced me to really reckon with these, these questions that I had set aside for so many years. So I decided to finally go to Mass. I better go to Mass and see what it's all about. I sort of felt like I was like an invader, like a spy. I'm doing recon here at this parish. I went to the local Catholic parish, and what do you know? It's Trinity Sunday. I'm not even sure there's a God. And they're trying to tell me about this Trinity thing. I thought that was a little unfair of the Almighty. Okay, Eric, you're coming back to church. Trinity. Try that on for size. Because, as I was reading, I started to read the Confessions of St. Augustine. I'm reading the Gospel of Matthew. I'm listening to these tapes. And I keep thinking, oh, this is going to take a long time. Oh, this is going to take even longer than I thought. I'm going to be years on this. Study, process, you think about it, whatever. But going to Mass, despite the theological conundrum of the Trinity, it honestly, it may sound hokey, but it just put a desire in my heart for the Eucharist. I wanted to be part of, because I was not going up there and putting that wafer on my tongue if I didn't believe in it. So I started going to Sunday Mass, and eventually I decided I just didn't really care about all the doubts and questions and uncertainties and things I felt I needed to study up on. I just went to confession. And when I showed up at the church that day, it was St. John Cantius Church in Chicago, which is...
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful church.
It is.
They celebrate a variety of different liturgies there. They have permission to celebrate the Tridentine liturgy. They also have the Novus Ordo in Latin, which is an interesting experience. It's very, very similar to the Tridentine liturgy. And when they celebrate the Novus Ordo in English, they do it with tremendous reverence, really showing the continuity between the liturgies. So I'm at this church, and I'm standing in line for confession. I've just been to the 11 o'clock Novus Ordo in Latin, I think it was. And I got to say, let me pause for a moment and tell you one little story. I'm at this Mass. I'm with my sister, Annie, who was kind of my guardian angel through a lot of this. I'd had a really bad influence on her, pulling her out of the church when she was younger. And so it was sort of appropriate that she was my guide, sort of coming back in. I would talk to her. I didn't want my parents to know what I was going through, because I didn't want to get their hopes up for nothing, because I figured it was a phase. I had lots of hobbies and interests that had been passing, so I wasn't sure this was going to stick at the time. I didn't want to bring their hopes up for nothing. So I was talking to Annie. So we were at this Mass at St. John Cantius Church, and the kiss of peace, the sign of peace, came around. And I haven't been to Mass now for years. So I just turned to the person behind me. And at St. John Cantius, they don't really do the sign of peace much. It's sort of not in their culture. And this woman sort of unfolded her hand and sort of handed it to me like a dead fish. Ice cold. If I had not had my sister there, if I had not screwed myself up for this moment, because I knew I was going to confession after this Mass, I might have walked out right then and there. So I just want to caution people who are listening. Always remember that person in front of you at church who's stupidly turning around to shake your hand when you're not supposed to, they could be a person who's about to either come back into the church or walk away forever because you were cold and rude to them at that moment.
Eric,
so
if I can stop you right there. Yeah, what you're saying right now is so important, because a lot of people that begin to get really passionate about the faith and they dive into learning about it and learning about the liturgy, they become very fervent in their deepened understanding of the liturgy. And a lot of times that includes the realization, we're not supposed to hold hands during the Our Father. The Mass doesn't call for that. We're not supposed to hold our hands up like if we are the priest during the Our Father. It doesn't call for that. And so when people get really excited about the things that they're learning, then all of a sudden, when other people offer to to hold hands during the Our Father, they're like rigid like a statue, like, no, because I'm smarter than you and I'm holier than you and I'm going to do it right. And I've had the same concern. Now, I'm a very hardcore traditionalist personally, but that never comes before charity. And I think that there is a very important case to be made about charity in those moments, like the sign of peace, like the Our Father, where you could be doing damage to someone else's spiritual life out of your obsession to do something quote unquote correctly. So just wanted to jump in and share that. And I appreciate the point you made.
Yeah. And it's not my place to judge that woman, or maybe she was having a bad day or whatever, but it was, I thought, an interesting moment for me. I was very grateful that I wasn't turned away. So Mass is over. I'm now in line for confession. And who should walk into the church but my father, Joe Scheidler, who I knew had been going to Mass. I kind of forgotten about it. He'd been going to Mass twice every Sunday, once for himself and once for me, because I was out of the church.
Wow.
And
Wow.
in fact, when I came back to the church and I was going to conferences and things, working with the Gift Foundation, I would meet people who said, "Oh yeah, your dad told me to pray for his rotten son who left the church. Glad to hear you're back." And they'd say, "I can quit praying now." I was like, "No, you can't. You have to keep praying for me now more than ever." But it made me very, very nervous because, as I said, I didn't want my parents to know that I was contemplating this move. And I almost left. I almost walked right out. "Oh, let's do this another time." I was so afraid he was going to turn around and see me and I would just flee. But he didn't see me. He went and sat down. His back is to me. He's praying. I know he's praying for me. And I'm standing there in the line of the confessional. And I went in and I confessed my sins over the past, 15 years or whatever since my last confession. And I made the priest day. I mean, there's nothing like somebody who's been away from the church for over a decade coming back. And it was a good confession. But I have to share with you that my experience walking out of that confessional and walking out of that church wasn't what you might expect. I'm supposed to tell the story about how, the clouds parted and an angelic voice, a beam of light, a lifting of spirits. I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like, smack my head. What have I just done? And I would wake up every morning for like a week and a half after that, coming back into the church, and oh no, oh my gosh, I'm Catholic. What did I do? It felt like the weight of the world, and in a way I was resentful. I was like, I was supposed to be full of joy. They told me I'd be full of joy. But I think that was really a kind of a gift, because I think God knew, as we all should know, that the spiritual journey is never so simple, and having now sat with that conversion for, something like 25 years or more, this was 1997. I now recognize that a lot of that original fervor, that zeal, it's there to kind of push you towards some things, expose you to things, get you into communities where you meet people, get books on your shelf, you can get tools into your arsenal, and then it fades. It for most of us, it fades into the background, and we're not fired up like that. There'll be moments where it comes back. There'll be periods of time where, I'm so excited about religious reading and I can't get enough of praying the Chaki. I'm now actually a Byzantine Rite Catholic, which is a whole nother, is a whole other story, in my journey. But, I think the fact that it was something that I had to be really intentional about and choose to do day after day after day, without a whole lot of consolation there at the beginning. It was much more later, as I got more into it. But I think it gave me a little bit more sort of maturity about the spiritual life.
Thank you.
Where was your wife at the beginning of this journey when you were on the fence between atheism and agnosticism?
Well, she was, my life was kind of directionless. We were having a lot of arguments in our marriage, fighting about sex and money and all the things that people do argue about. In the back of my mind, I had thought, well, 3 kids, I heard something on National Public Radio. I was a big fan and donor at the time. Not a big donor. I was a small fry donor, but a big fan of National Public Radio. And there was a report about serial marriage. People have a marriage for early on, and they have a marriage for when they have children, then they have another marriage for later in life when they want to retire. And that seemed like it might make sense to me,
All right.
Women, when they're breastfeeding and nursing, their libido isn't as sharp as it once was, and that can be a struggle for a husband. You start thinking about other options. So we were really in a dark place. I had other struggles in my life. Some things that were impeding my freedom, and I think her initial reaction was, "Well, sounds good. I don't think it'll stick. It's just another one of Eric's enthusiasms." So she was skeptical but hopeful. But once I started to stick with it, and I started, going to Sunday Mass, and then started going to daily Mass and reading books and talking with her about it, introducing her to, books on the faith, Peter Kraft, Scott Hahn tapes. She really took to it and joined RCIA, started taking classes there. We decided we wanted to have our 3 children baptized, because I hadn't had them baptized. I did agree to have a priest present at our marriage, to just so my parents would show up. And I felt like that was, I felt like I kind of had to lie my way into getting a priest there about raising the kids Catholic and all that. I had my own sort of mental reservation for what I meant by that. And, a couple of really tough conversations with my parents' pastor. We happen to know from his conversation with the Protestant minister who celebrated the marriage at my mother-in-law's church that the priest thought we had no chance. This marriage is not lasting. He was wrong, at least so far. We're going to be celebrating our 31st anniversary, in a few days.
Wow.
Nice. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, sort of. We were married on Leap Day. So
Okay.
we don't really have an anniversary this year. It's kind of weird. That seemed very clever at the time, but now it's just annoying that we
Well, what's interesting about what you just said about your parents' pastor and what kind of got leaked to you down the grapevine is there's a sense in which, or maybe I should say, there's an alternate universe in which he wasn't wrong, were it not for the work of the Holy Spirit in your life.
Yeah.
And what the conversion and transformation that happened for you as an individual and then for you as a marriage, like were it not for that, what you were describing was essentially a scenario in which he was right.
Yeah, he had good reason, I think, for some of that skepticism. Though I would have loved it if he'd had deeper insight and saw that there was something really there. But anyway,
right.
I wasn't going to do any more of that BS. I wasn't going to get my children baptized to make grandparents happy. So I refused to do that. And so I had 3 unbaptized children. So we had them all baptized at my parents' church on the same day. And people were, the following week, when they saw the bulletin, were coming up to my parents and congratulating them on the triplets. 3 children were baptized on the same day. It must have been triplets. They were,
wow.
Something like, 4, 3, and 1 at the time.
So you grew up Catholic then? I mean, you were baptized Catholic, cradle Catholic, Catholic school, everything.
Right. Yeah, I went to Catholic school, grade school and high school. It was in the 70s. So there was a lot of, free to be you and me type of vibe going on. Yeah. Our religious education was pretty watered down. And yet, I got to say, honestly, through the lens of time, I learned an awful lot, and it did lay a good foundation. As much as we might criticize some of the overuse of felt and felt banners. And,
I love
but
that.
I can't help it. I have a soft space in my heart for day by day. And I'm always going to. I recently, two of my daughters were recently in a production of Godspell, and I loved that song. It was one of the first songs I learned to play on guitar as an atheist. So, I have a hard time faulting too much the education I had as a young person, even though I recognize it could have been stronger. Good education. I went to St. Ignatius College Prep in Chicago, prestigious Jesuit high school, and learned a lot there too. Some negative influence as well. I mean, one priest who kind of hinted that premarital sex wasn't such a big deal, and another who was making inappropriate jokes in Latin class, and a couple other things like that. But then I went off to college. I continued to go to Mass all through college until my senior year. The only time I missed Mass was when I was in Morocco during my junior year abroad. I was at Nottingham University and traveled to Morocco. And I could not find a Catholic church. There was a building because you can't have a cross on a building there. So there was one building that I thought looked like it might be a church, and I found out later it was. So I might have been able to get to at least walk into a church that Sunday during Lent of 1987. So I missed Mass then. But then it's my senior year of college. I was partying a lot. I was sleeping with my girlfriend. And I was never somebody who could kind of be on board sort of halfway. So I just quit going to Mass. I couldn't go and create some excuse for why I'm allowed to sleep around or whatever. I fell away because I didn't want to, follow the teachings of the church, and I didn't want to be a hypocrite pretending that I did. That was when I left. And then for, the formation of my family, my wife was pregnant at the time we were married. All of those years of early childhood, raising the kids and being super busy and under a lot of pressure and all of it, it really was a tremendous blessing for my family once we started to go to Mass again, because it wasn't just the natural family planning. It's being a young parent and the struggles of that, the challenges of that, and questions coming up. My oldest son, when he was 3 or 4, asked me, what happens when you die? And I really didn't know what to say to him. It was one of those type of deals. So the moment was right, I think, for us to embrace the faith, and it was a tremendous blessing.
So, Eric, during the time now that you're going through this reversion, right, coming back to the church, what were you doing for work at that time? And then how did the Pro-Life Action League come in? I mean, because it's such a radical shift from your life, but now it also moved into your professional life, into your work life as well.
Right. Tighten your seatbelts. So I'm in the middle of this NFP class and coming back to the faith and reading the Bible and listening to Scott Hahn and all this stuff. And I remembered, I was watching my brain turn from contradicting articles of the faith to defending articles of the faith. I watched the same brain completely turn and start to defend ideas that it had been dismissing a few months before and had dismissed for years. And I remembered a conversation I had with an old friend of mine, a guy named Steve. Steve had been my next door neighbor my freshman year of college. And he had traveled a little bit with me when I was away in Europe for that year of school. And, he had been there actually through some of my early steps in my relationship with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and had given me some good advice. And I remember I had run into him years later when I was now a confirmed atheist at a party, and he confronted me about my beliefs. He said, Eric, I think you're telling yourself that you philosophically disconnected with the Catholic Church, but I think you just didn't want to live a Catholic life. I don't think you wanted to follow the teachings, so you changed your mind. I remembered that conversation because I was watching my mind, which I thought I told myself had been the reason why I'd left the faith, because I'd seen reason. I'd seen that it wasn't true. I talked myself out of it with, evidence and argument. And I realized that wasn't really true, that it was when I wanted to leave the church that I started finding reasons to. And when I wanted to come back to the church, I started finding reasons to. And so I decided I was going to look this guy up and see if he was still around. First of all, is he still Catholic? People fall away all the time. I was hoping he would still be Catholic. If he weren't, I don't know what I would have done. But I called him up. I found his number. And it turned out that he was actually in an NFP class himself with his fiance. They were about to get married. And her name was April, the same name as my wife's name. And he had just said to his fiance April the night before, after their NFP class, he said, I bet you that just doing this stuff, this NFP thing, I bet that could have a spiritual effect on somebody. I bet it could be the Holy Spirit could reach somebody through this. The next day, his old college buddy calls him up and says, hey, I took this NFP class, and it had this incredible spiritual effect on me just doing it. It was unreal.
Wow.
And he had already decided that he wanted to do something about it. He had a very successful electronic controls company, and he wanted to do something with his money. He wanted to put it towards a good cause. And so he was trying to decide what to do. And between the two of us, we kind of talked about it some more, and he decided to found an organization. We called it the Gift Foundation, and it was going to promote natural family planning and God's teachings on marriage. And he needed somebody to help him write down some of his initial ideas. So he hired me part-time to be his writer for the Gift Foundation. Eventually, he offered me a full-time job, including a signing bonus, which made it possible for my prayer to Our Lady that my wife and I would be able to get a bigger car and have another baby to be answered. I'd been praying the rosary. Mary, we want to have another baby, but we can't fit any more kids in our car, which is an actual practical concern. There's a weird essay out there you can Google about how car seats cause population decline. Because people can't afford a bigger car. You are requiring children to be in car seats for so many years. I don't have to give you the whole agreement now, but this was a practical concern for us. We can't fit any more kids.
We've already encountered that ourselves.
Yeah. We have 3 different children who required us to upgrade our vehicle over the course of the years. So I just started this new job. It provided the financial boost to be able to get a minivan so we could fit more children. My daughter Claire was conceived and born at home, and that was the beginning of a whole new life for us. But that was my real entree into pro-life work. Because of my name, because of my father's reputation, I was able to open up a lot of doors for this new organization in terms of getting advice from people, getting our name out there, going to conferences, getting some funding and some connections. And so for about 5 years, I was working on the Gift Foundation project. Eventually, the financial, the sort of soundness of that organization wasn't where it needed to be. And my father just basically asked me to come and work for him. He said, Eric, I feel like, you're being held back over there. You need to come over here to the Pro-Life Action League. I'd like to have you. So I came on board in 2002 as a communications director and redid our website, was responsible for our media outreach. I created an email. It was our first email list, back in the early days. I'd been deeply involved with email and online communities going back to before the World Wide Web even existed, when it was all news groups and Linux systems, and the original web was all text, no pictures. Right. So I had a lot of familiarity there and brought that to the organization. And then eventually assumed more and more leadership. I started to run events, our Face the Truth tours in the summers, our protests. And then when Planned Parenthood was trying to open up a mega center in Aurora, Illinois, I happened to live in that town, and I just moved to Aurora, and I really took the leadership of that battle against this mega center. Became internationally sort of notorious. There was a story in I think a Swedish newspaper about our fight over Planned Parenthood. We were on NBC Nightly News, and Sean Hannity did a segment, and it was just crazy time. So I really cut my teeth dealing with police, dealing with the media, dealing with large crowds of people, organizing large events, communicating with people. And it was a sort of a crash course in leadership for me. And so in the wake of that experience, I took the role of executive director of the organization. My father took the title of national director. So since about 2008 or 9, I've been running the Pro-Life Action League. And for the past 2 years, since my father passed away in January of 2021, I've been the boss, which is a whole different experience. And it turns out I'm not Joe Scheidler. I'm Eric Scheidler, a very different person. And that's been one of my challenges, is to honor my father's legacy while also being the person that I uniquely am with the story I've shared part of today, which makes me who I am.
That's beautiful.
Wow. Could you share a little bit with for our viewers and listeners that may not know who your father is? Could you just kind of, you've alluded to this reputation and what that has meant for your career in terms of networking and stuff. Who was your father, and what should we know about him?
Well, on September 30th, 1972, my father was hunkering down to watch a Notre Dame, I think, versus Michigan football game. He went to Notre Dame, graduated class of 1950. And my mother interrupted and said, Joe, I promised that we would go to the Right to Life event downtown. So he agreed, bundled at that time, me and my 2 brothers. I now have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. There were just 3 of us at the time. Took us down to the Civic Center in downtown Chicago, now known as Daley Plaza, with the big Picasso statue people may have seen. Mm-hmm. Somebody handed my dad a pamphlet called Life and Death, which Dr. Jack Wilkie had first put together, one of the early pioneers of the pro-life movement, who had been sounding the alarm that abortion was coming for years. This rally was about keeping Illinois pro-life. This was before Roe v. Wade, when there was a real national debate about abortion. And people don't know this, but legislatures that had been liberalizing abortion laws in the late 60s and early 70s were starting to reconsider. Even the state of New York, which had one of the most liberal abortion laws of all early on, the legislature had voted to overturn that law because they saw the effect it was having. The abortion tourism and the all the unaccountable abortion doctors had just, the back alley abortionists became front Main Street abortionists. They were the same guys. Mm-hmm. Republican Governor Nelson Rockefeller vetoed that effort. So there was a real debate. Many people think that the Supreme Court simply ushered in the inevitable, but that's not true. This might have gone a very different way without Roe v. Wade. Somebody handed my dad this flyer, and there was a picture of a whole pile of babies that had been aborted very late in pregnancies, black and white picture, in a dumpster with a black, garbage liner. One of the faces of these aborted babies that were aborted up in Canada, where abortion was already legal, reminded him of my baby picture. And at that moment, abortion became personal for him. He started to study abortion. He read The Death Peddlers by Father Paul Marks, an early book about the abortion industry. He had gotten inside and done some investigation. He was learning about fetal development. He was becoming obsessed with the issue. Then Roe v. Wade came. He didn't even know that case was before the court. It actually had oral arguments twice. That's one of the weird things about Roe v. Wade. It was brought back up. So it was a year and a half or two from the time the court first took the case up before they finally ruled on it on January 22nd, 1973, when my dad happened to be home sick with the flu and got the newspaper the next morning and saw that this had happened. It was the same day that Lyndon B. Johnson had died. So that was the headline news. And there under the fold was Supreme Court, strikes down all abortion limits. It was like he felt it was like a suicide note for America. And he just lost interest in his work as an ad executive. He had the Shakespeare Fishing Lines was one of his accounts at Siebold, this massive advertising company, which is still in existence today and the largest advertising company in the world, I believe. But he had a boss who was a good Catholic guy, also a Notre Dame graduate. And his boss said, "Joe, I can tell that you've lost interest in your work. It's suffering, but you're a good PR guy. Why don't you, we'll stay on the company insurance. We'll give you some severance pay and we'll allow you to go out and start a project because you'd be really good at this." So with that encouragement, he started a very small pro-life office in Chicago, the Office for Pro-Life Information. Their main mission at first was to put ads in the newspapers next to the ads for abortion. Because immediately there were ads for abortion in the paper. The same abortionists who were doing it illegal yesterday are now doing it legally, today. And eventually he was hired by Illinois Right to Life. He was there for 5 or 6 years before they ousted him. He was too bold for them. He was too outspoken. He caused too much trouble, made too many headlines. And so he eventually founded his own organization, the Pro-Life Action League, where he would be free to do the kind of direct action that he thought was necessary, even if it made people unhappy, even if it was hard to get along with people at dinner parties in academia or amongst the bishops' circles or wherever. And that's what he then did. He was inspired to do that by having marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was a teacher at Mundelein College in Chicago in the 60s. He had chaperoned a trip down to Selma and Montgomery, and it had seen the impact of regular people taking ownership for a social justice cause. He wanted to bring that same type of energy to the pro-life movement. And so he founded the Pro-Life Action League. Shortly thereafter, he wrote a book called Closed, 99 Ways to Stop Abortion, which was an activist manual. Every chapter in that book gave you a different thing you could do. And many of those chapters are now full-fledged organizations. So, infiltrate their meetings. That's David Daleiden and the Center for Medical Progress videos. Go out and speak out, offering women help at abortion centers. That is Sidewalk Advocates for Life. Pray at the abortion clinic. That is 40 Days for Life. You go down, do outreach at schools. That's Students for Life. So countless pro-life organizations, not only in America, but around the world, grew out of that book and the network of activists that my father put together, and for which he was ultimately sued as a conspirator, as a racketeer by the National Organization for Women. It's a long story, which you can read all about in his memoir. I'm just looking for it on my shelf. Racketeer for Life.
He's grabbing it. This is
Racketeer
good.
for Life, Fighting the Culture of Death from the Sidewalk to the Supreme Court.
Hold it up so we can see it.
It's an exciting adventure.
Racketeer for always Life. Remember your dad with that hat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He used to auction those hats off. There's a whole shelf of them.
That's great.
That he had over the years.
Wow.
So that's his story. Direct activism was his thing. The National Organization for Women suing him as a racketeer was an incredible ordeal. It was a tremendous amount of strain. It lasted for over 20 years. It's the longest running court in federal U.S. court history, the only case in the history of the federal courts to go to the Supreme Court 3 times. The ultimate ruling had to be relitigated before them, and he ultimately was unanimously exonerated in that case.
In 2014.
It took forever. I mean, we had a victory celebration party way back in 2003 when we first won the case, but then had to win it again in 2006. And then we had to litigate all the final costs and things for many more years. So quite an ordeal. But, it gave him national, even international fame. It brought in a host of new donors, people who wanted to support a guy who was willing to go to those lengths in order to mount his appeal. It's very hard to get pro-lifers to donate money to a bond that might go to the National Organization for Women and a network of abortion clinics. So it was very hard to raise any donations for the appeal. So they had to put their own house up as their bond. Now, federal court laws have changed since then, and they no longer force people seeking an appeal to have that kind of money, which, when you think about it, isn't fair. You shouldn't have to be independently wealthy, in order to mount an appeal to a federal case. So the fact that they put their house on the chopping block, really impressed people a whole lot. They're willing to lose their home over this. Yeah. And it was really launched his sort of name across the country. So it was a blessing in disguise, despite being very, very difficult.
It's amazing when we're willing to release everything, even our own sense of security. And it takes realizing that God is our provider. God is our source of security. It's amazing the powerful and incredible, sometimes insane things that are possible when we're willing to lay everything on the line.
You got to detach. You have to detach from everything. So, Eric, how can, because we're going to have another episode with you. I know we're going to talk all about where we go from here now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. But for those that are only going to hear this episode, how can they reach you and get involved?
Well, you can find us online at prolifeaction.org. You can find us at Facebook, facebook.com/prolifeaction. We're on Twitter and other social media as well. If you go to our website, prolifeaction.org, scroll down to the bottom of the page and sign up for emails. We keep in touch with people about current news and the pro-life movement, but especially things that we're doing. Our emails you're not going to get a whole bunch of fundraising emails from me or just a concatenation of a bunch of news stories somebody else wrote. When you get an email from me, it's going to be telling you about something important going on in the pro-life movement, an action you can take part in. Like right now, we've been fighting the pharmaceutical companies that are trying to get licenses from the medication abortion manufacturers to sell those drugs at your local pharmacy. Soon, every pharmacy in America will have the opportunity to be an abortion facility. So we're giving people action items. Go join one of these protests, write a letter. And there's all kinds of things you can do. So we put people to work. We're not just asking for your bucks. We're not going to say no to donations. We are completely donor supported. We take care of our donors, and they appreciate the work that we do. They're very loyal. We're very blessed to have very, very loyal donors, some of whom have been with us for 20 and even 30 years.
Wow.
We're always seeking new people to help, whether it's through their financial contributions or volunteering at events or even becoming leaders. A lot of the work we do is recruiting and equipping people to be effective advocates for unborn children in their own communities. And we want to put you to work. We have an incredible resource called Sharing the Pro-Life Message, which is due for a massive update for the post-Roe world. That will be coming out this spring. You want to know about that and be one of the first to get your hands on a copy of that to help you be an advocate for unborn children in this entirely new landscape that we're trekking across and discovering now, week by week. So do join us, and we will put you to work on behalf of our unborn brothers and sisters.
Oh, thank you so much for coming today, Eric. We really, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. So, and thank you. I thank you for your fiat. You know what I mean? That's just it's amazing. So, and thank your wife too, because that's, it definitely seemed like it was a effort from the both of you, you know what I mean, to come back into communion with our Lord. So thank you very much. So, alrighty, well, that is what we have for this episode, and we want to thank you for joining us. If you can please go to the Awaken app on either your Apple Store or your Google Play Store and download it. You can also get it we're on everything, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can find us anywhere. And if you want to support us, Deacon is going to tell us how.
Just go to theprodigallife.com, and on there you will see different levels of giving, and we've attached those different levels of giving to the different hierarchies of angels, right? So you can be an angel investor in the prodigal life.
Yep. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.